Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I thought I would chat with you guys a little bit about gaining muscle, bulking, dietary fat versus carbs, things like that, in a way that is easy for people to understand, because this is a topic that gets confusing. There's a lot of nuance to it, and it becomes even more critical when we consider that different people have different levels of appetite. And not only do different people have different appetites, yours can change over time. Okay? In other words, you might find that what you have to eat to hit a certain number of calories in one year at a different point in your life later on might be completely different. And it makes the topic confusing. And it's also confusing, when a lot of people will say, but there's this study showing people gain a bunch of muscle when they eat these whole eggs, when they drink whole milk post workout, all this stuff. And what it comes down to is that you're dealing with very anabolic foods that have a lot of high quality protein, that have a lot of calories. Okay, and that's why that is. And what people need to always remember is that what we are dealing with muscle gain, particularly when you're very active and you train hard, is individual appetite, right, versus calorie needs, how many calories you're burning. And some people like me, can gain fat easily while burning an enormous number of calories simply because we get hungry really easy, right? And it really is that simple. It is that simple. It's nothing to do with a slow metabolism or anything else. I can bulk very easily. I have no trouble eating large amounts of calories, even with relatively clean foods. Yet I have clients and lifters who have to eat junk food. And people will say, oh, you're just trying to make them fat. They're not fat. I mean, the perfect example was Doug, who you guys saw that time back in the past on my fan page, hitting 300 plus incline benches, 340 bench, stuff like that. He weighs less than 200 pounds. Okay, he's doing that stuff in the 180s. He's not fat. He eats ice cream and stuff just to hit his calories. Now, people would argue, well, couldn't he drink a bunch of whole milk or whatever? Do the same thing? Of course he could. I have other lifters who eat very, very low fat. I eat very, very low fat. Why? Why is that? Because I don't need to eat calorically dense food with a lot of fat in it in order to hit a large number of calories. And that's purely the difference. It's an appetite issue. It's purely a difference in appetite. But it matters, doesn't it? Because realistically, people will bring that up and they'll say, but aren't those the best foods we can eat? Well, in theory, if you want to gain muscle as quickly as possible, yes, they're not more anabolic per calorie. They really aren't. Dietary fat is not particularly amazing for putting muscle on you. It's better for putting body fat on you. And it's easier to gain fat on a high-fat diet. Much easier to gain fat. And that's not hypothesis or speculation. There's both sound biology explaining it, and there's lab results confirming it. It's not a hypothesis. It's pretty good evidence for it, right? But here's what it comes down to. It comes down to calorie needs versus muscle growth. And here's an undeniable reality. And this isn't my opinion. Hey, this is plenty of experts who have provided data. I've seen Alan Aragon say this for years and years. Hey, Alan gets guys shredded. Alan has coached plenty of bodybuilders for contest preps. It's besides the fact that he's an academic with a formal background and all of that in nutritional science. Okay, he has all that, but he actually does do that, right? He actually has prepped quite a few natural bodybuilders for shows. They get shredded. I don't think anyone can say, oh, he's just some fat guy, some fat power lifter, like people will make the excuse. And he'll tell you this. Overeating will put muscle on you. People who do not lift weights, who are eating enough calories to gain fat, will gain muscle. Now, if you're not working out and you're eating a bunch of garbage to do it, a really high-fat diet, you're going to gain more fat than you're going to gain muscle, right? Because someone who gains 100 pounds of fat sure isn't gaining 100 pounds of muscle to go with it. We don't see that happening. But they are gaining muscle, and they're gaining pounds of muscle. In other words, if someone bulks up enough to gain 30 pounds of body fat who doesn't even work out, they're going to gain pounds of muscle with that 30 pounds of body fat. It might only be 5 pounds, which is, a terrible ratio. That's not a very good trade-off. And I think we all would agree with that. But they will gain muscle. You will always gain muscle if you're bulking enough to gain weight, particularly if you're bulking enough to gain body fat. But we need a calorie surplus to do that. There are lifters who simply cannot get a calorie surplus without eating large amounts of dietary fat. It's more calorically dense. There's 9 calories per gram of fat versus carbs or protein that have 4. And I'm not going to get into the discussion of thermic effect or any of that either. That's a whole other element. But realistically, dietary fat is going to become body fat more easily than the others will. Protein doesn't. It's almost biologically impossible for it to occur. It's only a hypothetical that it's even possible. Carbs do so at actually a pretty low rate. It's actually relatively difficult to store carbs as fat at any appreciable rate. Dietary fat can just store straight away. It's straightforward. It's easy. So what do we know from that? Well, we know that then the carbs and protein are more anabolic. And carbs are actually very anabolic. The insulin response and everything else from carbs tends to make them more anabolic. Okay, glycogen stores in your muscle tissue are more likely to soak up carbohydrates than your body fat will. We tend to burn off excess carbs as body heat. We don't store them readily as fat. And again, the insulin response, the extra training ability, the extra water retention we get in muscles from glycogen supercompensation, all that, carbs are more anabolic than fat is, period, to your muscle tissue, and they're less anabolic to your fat tissue. That's not a controversial statement, by the way. If you don't understand that, you don't understand sports nutrition or nutritional science. If you think that I'm messing with you in any way, or that that's not factually true. It is true. Here's the issue. Short of drinking a bunch of sugary drinks, which isn't really ideal, not really ideal, short of drinking a bunch of liquid refined sugar, a lot of people cannot get to a calorie surplus who are training without a lot of fat in their diet. They can't do it on a low-fat diet. If they could, technically, the lower fat, really low fat diet would be better for body composition and muscle gain on a calorie per calorie basis. Right? Calorie per calorie, it is superior. The problem is appetite. Problem is one of appetite. And that becomes even a larger issue if you're eating cleaner foods. My God, you're doing brown rice and broccoli. Foods that really can fill you up. For some people, that would be, there are plenty of people out there who it would just simply be impossible for them to choke down enough of that to reach a calorie surplus, particularly when you're training. Like you're working out, training hard. Not only are we dealing with the fact that you burn way more energy, you might find it difficult to not even puke all of it up. It's a problem. Well, those people need more dietary fat. That's why fat has a reputation for that. That's why even in the old school days, people look at that and say, well, how come those people did all that and a lot of them were jacked? It's like, well, number one, notice a lot of them weren't particularly as lean as potentially possible. One thing. Not that we care that much about that. Number two, they didn't have a bunch of refined carbs. The only calorie-dense foods that they had in the 50s and stuff to any appreciable degree were generally, bacon and eggs and heavy cream and whole milk, and that's what they had if they wanted to get the calories in. That's oftentimes what they had to do. And so these foods have a reputation, and a well-deserved reputation for that. But it's purely because of the caloric density. It's the calories. If you can get those calories from a bunch of starchy carbs or fruit, it's technically going to be slightly more anabolic to your muscle and less to your fat tissue. It's actually technically better. But the issue we come down to, a lot of guys can't do it. They just simply cannot eat the food to make appreciable gains in muscle mass or gain body weight, respectively, when they're training in order to gain it without eating high-fat foods, whether it's peanut butter or whole milk or fatty cuts of meat or whatever it is that they need to add. It is a calorie intake issue completely. It's not about it being ideal or the best biologically. It's the physical ability to get it in. All right, guys, so that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.